There is a question hiding inside one of the most famous stories in the Bible. It is a question most people never think to ask. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And when you look closely at what the Bible actually says, the answer is more fascinating than you might expect. The story is about Cain and Abel, two brothers, the sons of Adam and Eve. You probably know how it ends. Cain kills his brother Abel in a field. God confronts Cain. God punishes him. And then Cain says something that stops the story cold. He says, "Whoever finds me will kill me. Whoever finds me will kill me." Those 6 words have confused readers for thousands of years. Because at first glance, it sounds impossible. If Cain just killed the only other person his age, who exactly is he afraid of? Who is out there? That is the question. And to answer it properly, we have to go back to the very beginning. Because most people are only working with half the story. When we think about Adam and Eve, we usually picture 2 people alone in a garden. And when we picture their family, we usually think of 3 sons: Cain, Abel, and later Seth. That is the version most people carry around. But that is not what the Bible actually says. Genesis chapter 5, verse 4 says this: "After Adam had Seth, he lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters." Other sons and daughters. Not just 3 boys. Adam and Eve had an entire family of children across their lifetime. And according to the Bible, Adam lived to be 930 years old. 930 years. That is not a short time to raise a family. So the picture is not 2 people with 3 sons. The picture is 2 people who lived for nearly 1,000 years and had many children, who had children of their own, who had more children, and so on across many generations. The human family described in Genesis was growing long before Cain ever committed his crime. And by the time Cain murdered Abel, he was not living in a world with only 2 other people. He was living in a world with brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces and cousins and an extended family that had been growing for a very long time. Now the original confusion makes sense, and now Cain's fear makes sense too. Think about what Cain had just done. He had murdered his own brother. He had killed someone that his family loved. And now God was sending him away, telling him to wander, cutting him off from the community he had always been part of. Of course he was afraid. He was not afraid of strangers. He was afraid of his own family, people who had grown up with Abel, people who had watched Abel work, who had eaten with him, who had loved him, people who, when they heard what Cain had done, would have every reason to want justice. That is what Cain means when he says, "Whoever finds me will kill me." He is not describing a world full of unknown people. He is describing a family that had every right to be furious with him. He was an outcast now, a wanderer, and anyone from his own bloodline who crossed his path might decide that what he did to Abel deserved a response. And notice what God does next. God does not argue with Cain's fear. God does not say, "Relax, there is no one out there." Instead, God places a mark on Cain, a sign of protection, a warning to anyone who might encounter him that if they harm Cain, the consequences would be severe. God took the threat seriously because the threat was real. Cain's own extended family was the danger he feared, and God protected him from them anyway. This is where the story gets even more interesting, because after Cain leaves, the Bible tells us he goes to a land called Nod, east of Eden, and there he finds a wife, has a son named Enoch, and eventually builds a city. A wife. People to build a city with. And this is where some readers hit another wall. Where did these people come from? The answer is the same one we already established. The human population in Genesis was not just Adam, Eve, and 3 sons. It was a large and growing extended family spread across generations. Cain's wife was almost certainly a close relative, likely a sister or a niece from within that family. This was not unusual in the earliest period of human history as described in the Bible. There were no other people yet. The entire human population came from one family line, and so marriage within that family was the only option that existed at the time. Later in the Bible, God would give specific laws through Moses that prohibited certain close relationships within families. But those laws came much later. In the time of Cain, no such law existed. The Bible does not present this as a contradiction. It presents it as the straightforward reality of how the early human population grew and spread, and the city that Cain builds. That too makes sense within this framework. The Bible does not say Cain built it immediately after arriving in Nod. Genesis is not always telling events in a moment-by-moment sequence. It is often summarizing long stretches of time in just a few verses. Cain settled in the land of Nod. He had a son. Over time, as his family grew and multiplied across generations, a city grew out of that settlement. The Bible names it after his son Enoch, and Cain's line continued from there. So let us bring this all together. The question was, who was Cain afraid of? The Bible's own answer, when you read it carefully, is this. Cain was afraid of the people who already existed, not strangers with no connection to him, his own family. The descendants of Adam and Eve, who had been multiplying across many years and many generations, people who knew Abel, people who loved Abel, people who would have had every human reason to want vengeance against the man who killed him. God confirmed this fear was legitimate by giving Cain a mark of protection. Not protection from imaginary threats, but from real people with real grief and real anger. And this is where the story stops being just a historical puzzle and starts being something much bigger. Cain murdered his brother. He lied about it. He showed no remorse until he started worrying about himself. By any measure of justice, he deserved exactly what was coming to him. And yet, God put a mark on him. God said, "Whoever harms this man will answer to me." God followed Cain into exile and made sure he was not destroyed. The mystery of who was out there in the wilderness, waiting to find Cain, turns out to have a clear biblical answer once you understand the full picture Genesis gives us. Adam and Eve had many children. Those children had children. Humanity grew from one family across many generations. Cain feared the people he came from, the people who had every right to be angry with him. But the deeper mystery, the one the Bible leaves sitting quietly at the end of this story, is not about population or geography at all. It is about why, even after everything Cain did, he was still worth protecting.